Late one rainy evening, I found my daughter sitting alone on a wooden bench at an almost empty bus stop on the far side of town. The sky was heavy with dark clouds, and the steady drizzle made the streetlights glow in soft halos. Her small blue suitcase rested beside her, its edges damp, and her sneakers were muddy like she'd been walking for a long time. She sat very still, shoulders hunched, staring at the wet road as if she was waiting for something that might never come. When my car headlights fell across her face, she didn't jump up or wave the way she used to when she was younger. She just looked up slowly, her eyes dull and tired, and whispered in a shaky voice, "Dad, they said I don't fit in their life anymore." Those words hit me like a punch to the chest. I hadn't seen Emily in almost 4 months, not since she moved away with her mother after the divorce. Back then, she had been cheerful, full of questions, always talking about school and her drawings. But now she looked thinner, quieter, older somehow, like those few months had quietly stolen pieces of her childhood. I stepped out of the car and walked toward her slowly, afraid that if I moved too fast, she might break apart in front of me. "What happened, sweetheart?" I asked gently. She wrapped her arms around herself and kept staring at the ground. "Mom's husband said I make everything complicated, that I remind them of a life they don't want anymore." Her voice trembled as she continued. "He said they need peace and that there's no space for someone who doesn't belong." She swallowed hard before whispering the part that hurt the most. "Mom told me to pack a bag and wait here. She said maybe you would come because she doesn't know what else to do with me." For a moment I couldn't breathe. I just pulled her into my arms and she held on to me tightly like she had been holding herself together all day and finally couldn't anymore. She felt so light, too light, like she had been carrying invisible weight for months. This was my little girl, the same child who used to fall asleep on my chest while watching cartoons, the one who would laugh so hard at bedtime stories that she would hiccup, the one who once told me she wanted to grow up and paint the whole world happy. And now she was sitting alone in the rain, believing she was unwanted. I picked up her suitcase and opened the car door. "Come on," I said softly. "Let's go home." She hesitated for a moment before climbing in. She didn't ask questions. She just held her suitcase tightly, like it contained everything she had left in the world. We drove through the quiet, rain-washed streets in silence. The windshield wipers moved back and forth rhythmically, filling the space between us with a soft sound. After a while, she spoke in a small voice. "Dad, are you disappointed in me?" I tightened the grip on the steering wheel and looked at her. "Disappointed? Never. Not even for a second." She stared at her hands. "Then why does everyone keep leaving me?" That question cut deeper than anything else. I pulled the car to the side of the road and turned fully toward her. "Listen to me carefully, Emily," I said gently. "People leave because of their own fears, their own weaknesses, and sometimes their own selfish choices. But none of that has anything to do with your worth. You are not someone who can be thrown away." Tears slipped down her cheeks, but she nodded slowly, like she wanted to believe me. That night, instead of taking her to my cramped apartment, I drove to an old lakeside cottage that had once belonged to my mother. I hadn't visited it in years, not since she passed away. It sat at the end of a narrow dirt road, surrounded by tall trees and silence. When we stepped onto the porch, the wooden boards creaked under our feet. I pushed the door open, and a faint smell of dust and old memories filled the air. Emily walked inside slowly, looking around at the faded furniture, the stone fireplace, and the small window facing the lake. "It feels warm," she whispered. I smiled gently. This was my safe place when I was a kid. She looked at me with hopeful eyes. "Can we stay here?" I nodded. If you want, we can make this our new start." For the first time that night, she smiled. It was small and fragile, but it was real. That first night, we didn't even have proper beds ready. We spread old blankets on the floor near the fireplace and slept there. I lay awake for hours listening to her soft breathing, making a silent promise to myself that she would never again feel unwanted as long as I was alive. The following weeks weren't easy. The roof leaked whenever it rained. The heater worked only when it felt like it. Money was tight, and I had to take extra shifts at work. But slowly, life began to return to her. Every morning, she would sit by the window watching the sunrise over the lake. Sometimes she would sketch quietly. Sometimes she would hum little tunes she used to sing as a child. We fixed the cottage together. We painted walls, repaired broken shelves, planted flowers outside, and cleaned years of dust away. I taught her how to hold a paintbrush properly for walls, and she taught me how to mix colors for beauty. One afternoon, after we finished painting her room a soft yellow, she sat on the floor and said quietly, "This is the first place where I feel like I truly belong." I knelt beside her and placed my hand gently on her head. "You always belonged, Emily. You just needed someone who would never leave." Months passed, and the cottage slowly transformed, not just in appearance, but in feeling. Laughter returned. Warm dinners filled the kitchen with comfort. Music sometimes played from an old radio while we worked together. Emily joined her school's art club and started making friends. Her teachers noticed her talent, and she began winning small competitions. One evening, about a year later, we sat together on the porch, watching the sunset reflect on the lake. She leaned her head on my shoulder and said softly, "Dad, that night at the bus stop, you didn't just pick me up, you saved me." I smiled and shook my head gently. "No, sweetheart, we saved each other." And in that moment, I realized something simple but powerful. Being a parent isn't about having a perfect life for all the right answers. Sometimes it's simply about showing up at the exact moment your child feels most alone. Because one warm hug, one open door, and one person who refuses to give up on them can turn the darkest night into the beginning of a new home.